Commander HFY of the Galactic Council's Enforcement Division had seen many horrors in his 40-year career. Wars that consumed entire star systems, planets stripped bare by corporate greed, species driven to extinction by disease or conflict. But nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him aboard the Kethmoran slave ship Prophet's Edge. The Kethmoran were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless traders who dealt in anything profitable, regardless of legality or morality. Their gray, chitinous bodies and multiple arms made them efficient at handling cargo, while their complete lack of empathy made them perfect for the slave trade. What they weren't known for was stupidity. Yet here they were, apparently having committed the most catastrophically stupid act in galactic history. HFY's 4 eyes swept across the cargo hold, his blue-scaled skin rippling with barely controlled rage. Rows upon rows of containment cells lined the walls, each one designed to hold different species in appropriate atmospheric conditions. Most contained the usual victims: Vorthon miners, silicate crystal farmers, Nexian data processors. But it was the cells in the center section that made his blood run cold. Human children, dozens of them, ranging from what appeared to be 5 to 15 years of their species' age cycles. They huddled together in groups, their small forms wrapped in the thin emergency blankets the Kethmoran had apparently provided. Some were crying, the sound a pitiful wailing that seemed to cut through the ship's hull plating. Others sat in stunned silence, their large eyes staring at nothing. "By the 7 moons of Kethtar," HFY whispered, his translator struggling with the mixture of shock and profanity. "Captain Vexthul, please tell me you have a reasonable explanation for this." Captain Vexthul clicked his mandibles nervously, his secondary arms fidgeting with the control pad on his belt. The Kethmoran's primary eyes darted between HFY and the cells, while his smaller auxiliary eyes kept watch on the enforcement officers spreading throughout the ship. "Commander, I can explain everything. These specimens were acquired through proper channels. The Terran colony of New Brisbane was experiencing economic difficulties, and—" "Specimens?" HFY's voice rose an octave, causing several nearby officers to turn their heads. "Did you just call human children specimens?" "Well, yes. They are quite valuable. The neural plasticity of juvenile humans is remarkable. They can be trained for complex computational tasks, entertainment purposes, or—" HFY held up one clawed hand, silencing the captain mid-sentence. He needed a moment to process what he was hearing. In all his years of dealing with the worst the galaxy had to offer, he had never encountered such breathtaking ignorance. "Captain," he said slowly, each word carefully measured, "are you aware of who these children belong to?" Vexthul's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or amusement. "They belong to whoever purchases them, of course. I have several interested buyers already. The Hegemony Science Division is particularly interested in the younger ones for their cognitive enhancement experiments." The temperature in the cargo hold seemed to drop several degrees. HFY felt his combat implants automatically activate, flooding his system with adrenaline analogs. Behind him, he heard the soft whine of energy weapons being charged by his officers. "These are human children," HFY said, his voice now deadly quiet. "Do you understand what that means?" Of course. Humans are the newest species to achieve spaceflight, primitive but surprisingly adaptive. Their young, HFY interrupted, belong to the single most dangerous, unpredictable, and terrifyingly effective military force in the known galaxy. For the first time since they'd boarded the ship, Captain Vexthul looked uncertain. His auxiliary eyes stopped their constant scanning and focused on HFY. Dangerous? But humans are barely past their industrial phase. They've only had faster-than-light travel for 30 of their years. They're practically children themselves on a galactic scale. HFY began to pace, his talons clicking against the metal deck plating. "Captain, let me share some recent history with you," 3 years ago, the Korthak Empire decided to test human resolve by attacking one of their outer colonies. It was meant to be a simple raid to steal some resources and maybe take a few slaves. Do you know what happened? Vex Thul remained silent, but his mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. The humans traced the Korthak fleet back to their home system. Not content with simply retaliating against the raiders, they systematically dismantled the entire Korthak military infrastructure. 57 heavily defended worlds fell in 18 standard months. The Korthak Emperor himself begged for mercy through every diplomatic channel he could find. One of the human children, a small girl with blonde hair, had approached the front of her cell. She was listening intently to the conversation, her bright blue eyes darting between HFY and the Kethmoran captain. HFY noticed her attention and felt another surge of protective instinct. "But that's just military conquest," Vex Thul protested weakly. "Many species are capable of warfare." "Military conquest?" HFY's laugh was bitter. "Captain, the humans didn't just defeat the Korthak military, they revolutionized warfare itself. They deployed weapons and tactics that our greatest strategic minds couldn't have conceived. Kinetic bombardment using asteroid-sized projectiles, viral warfare that targeted specific genetic markers, ships that could phase in and out of normal space-time." He gestured toward the cells containing the children. "And do you know what drove them to such extremes? The Korthak had killed 17 human civilians in their raid. 17 adults. You've taken over 60 children." The ship's atmospheric systems seemed to struggle with the sudden tension in the cargo hold. Several of HFY's officers had moved closer to the Kethmoran crew, their hands resting on weapon grips. "Furthermore," HFY continued, "humans have this peculiar trait that makes them unique among all known sapient species. They form emotional attachments not just to their own offspring, but to all young members of their species. Every human child is considered precious by every human adult, regardless of genetic relationship." Vex Thul's chitinous shell had begun to pale, shifting from dark gray to an almost white color. "Surely you exaggerate. No species could be so irrational as to—" "Irrational?" HFY moved closer to the captain, his superior height and predatory bearing making the Kethmoran shrink back. "Let me tell you about irrationality. 2 years ago, a single human child was kidnapped by pirates in the Vega system. One child, taken by a small band of criminals for ransom." The blonde girl pressed closer to the cell barrier, and HFY could see intelligence in her eyes that belied her young age. She was memorizing every word, every detail. Good. She would need that information for what was to come. "The human colonial navy deployed 3 full battle fleets to hunt down those pirates. They didn't just rescue the child, they hunted down every pirate in the entire sector. It took them 8 months, but they found every single one. The lucky ones died quickly." 3 fleets for one child? Vex Thul's voice was barely a whisper. 3 fleets, 67 capital ships, 234 escort vessels, over 50,000 trained killers, all focused on the singular goal of retrieving one small human and punishing those who had harmed her. HFY turned to look directly at the children in their cells. Many of them were listening now, their fear beginning to mix with something else. Hope, perhaps, or anticipation. "Captain Vex Thul," HFY said, not turning away from the children, "I need you to understand something very clearly. These 63 children represent the single greatest catastrophe that could befall the Kethmoran Republic. When, not if, when, the humans discover what you've done, they will not stop until every single child is returned safely. But we can negotiate." "No." HFY's voice cut through the captain's words like a plasma cutter through hull plating. "You cannot negotiate with humans when it comes to their children. It's not in their psychological makeup. They will spend every credit, sacrifice every ship, and kill every enemy between them and these children. The enforcement commander activated his personal communicator, sending out a broad-spectrum emergency signal. All Council vessels, all Allied fleets, all neutral shipping in sectors 7 through 12. Be advised that a Class 1 extinction event is now in progress. Human military forces are likely to enter the sector within standard days. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. Vexthul staggered backward, as if physically struck. Extinction event? Surely you don't mean... I mean exactly that. Zephai's 4 eyes fixed on the Kethmaran captain with predatory intensity. Your species has perhaps 72 hours before the full might of the human colonial navy arrives in this system, and they will not come alone. The blonde girl spoke for the first time, her voice small but clear. Are our parents coming for us? Zephai knelt down to her eye level, his fierce expression softening slightly. Yes, little one, your parents are coming, and they're bringing friends. Behind him, Captain Vexthul made a sound that might have been a sob or a death rattle. How many friends? Zephai stood slowly, his gaze never leaving the child's face. She was smiling now, and he found that somehow more terrifying than any weapon he'd ever faced. Every human in known space, Captain. Every single one. The ship's communication array suddenly came to life, flooding the bridge with incoming signals. Zephai's personal communicator translated the first few messages automatically. Human commercial fleet requesting navigation data to this system. Human merchant marine requesting docking permissions. Human colonial survey division requesting detailed system maps. But it was the final message that made even Zephai's blood run cold. Human home fleet requesting immediate surrender of all hostile vessels and personnel. Compliance will result in swift justice. Resistance will result in total annihilation. Captain Vexthul collapsed into his command chair, his multiple arms hanging limply at his sides. How long do we have? Zephai checked his chronometer and felt his stomach drop. The messages had been sent using human quantum entanglement communication systems, which meant they were essentially instantaneous across galactic distances. But the time stamps indicated they had been transmitted 6 hours ago. Captain, he said quietly, you don't have any time at all. They're already here. The first sign that the humans had arrived wasn't the appearance of their ships on the sensor screens. It wasn't the sudden jamming of all communication frequencies. It wasn't even the electromagnetic pulse that disabled half the ship's secondary systems. It was the silence. The Prophet's edge had been drifting in the shadow of an asteroid field, hiding among the tumbling rocks, while Captain Vexthul desperately tried to contact his superiors for instructions. The normal background chatter of space traffic control, merchant vessels, and patrol ships had filled the communication channels. Then, in the span of 3 heartbeats, every single voice went quiet. Commander Zephai stood on the bridge of his enforcement vessel, the Justice's Hammer, watching his tactical displays with growing dread. His ship was docked to the Kethmaran vessel, and his officers were still working to process the evidence of the slave operation, but evidence was the last thing on his mind now. Sir, his communications officer reported, her voice tight with stress, we're detecting massive gravitic disturbances throughout the system. Whatever's coming, it's big. How big? Zephai asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Unknown, sir. The disturbances are unprecedented. Our sensors can't make sense of the readings. On the main screen, space itself seemed to ripple and fold. The stars wavered like heat mirages, and several of the larger asteroids simply vanished from sensor contact. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion stopped. Where there had been empty space moments before, a fleet materialized. Zephai had seen every major naval force in the galaxy. He had witnessed the grand parades of the Altarian Empire, with their golden ships stretching from horizon to horizon. He had observed the brutal efficiency of the Korthak war machine before the humans dismantled it. He had even seen the mysterious vessels of the ancient precursors during their brief return to normal space. Nothing had prepared him for this. The human fleet defied conventional understanding of space warfare. Ships of every conceivable size and configuration filled the void, from sleek fighters no larger than shuttlecraft to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed entire space stations. But it wasn't their size that made HFY's breath catch in his throat. It was their sheer number. "How many?" he whispered. His tactical officer's hands moved frantically across her control panel, trying to process the sensor data. "I'm reading. This can't be right. Sir, I'm detecting over 12,000 individual vessels." 12,000? HFY felt his legs go weak. The largest fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Council had comprised just over 800 ships, and that had taken 3 years to organize. "Correction, sir. That was just the first wave. I'm detecting additional gravitic disturbances throughout the system." More fleets began to materialize. Some emerged from hyperspace with the characteristic flash of faster-than-light drives. Others seemed to phase into existence from parallel dimensions. A few simply appeared without any detectable means of arrival, as if they had been there all along and had only just chosen to become visible. Within 30 minutes, the space around the asteroid field contained the largest military armada in recorded galactic history. HFY's computers stopped trying to maintain an accurate count after reaching 40,000 vessels. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're being hailed. By the humans? By everyone, sir. The Council, the Hegemony, the Trade Federation, the Free Colonies. It appears that every major power in the galaxy is demanding to know our status." "Tell them," HFY began, then stopped. What could he possibly tell them? That a single ship of Kethmore enslavers had somehow triggered what appeared to be the mobilization of the entire human species. The main screen flickered, and a new image appeared. A human face, middle-aged, with graying hair and lines around the eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. The human wore what appeared to be a military uniform, though it bore no insignia that HFY recognized. "Unidentified vessels," the human said, his voice calm and controlled. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Navy. You are occupying a restricted zone. Please identify yourselves and state your business here." HFY activated his ship's communications system, switching to the standard diplomatic frequency. "Admiral Chen, this is Commander HFY of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. We are conducting a lawful investigation of suspected slave trading activities." There was a pause. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice had changed subtly. The politeness remained, but underneath it was something that made HFY's combat instincts scream warnings. "Commander HFY, are you currently aboard a vessel containing human children?" The question was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. HFY realized that the humans already knew the answer. This wasn't a request for information. It was a test. "Yes, Admiral. We have discovered 63 human children aboard a Kethmoran slave ship. They appear to be unharmed, and we are working to—" 63. The Admiral's voice had gone completely flat. 63 children. "Yes, ma'am. We believe they were taken from the colony world of New Brisbane approximately 4 standard days ago." Another pause. Longer this time. When the Admiral spoke again, her words were directed not at HFY, but at someone off-screen. "Confirm. 63 children from New Brisbane missing 4 days. Alert all medical teams for immediate trauma response and contact the families." She turned her attention back to HFY. "Commander, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My government has authorized the use of any and all means necessary to secure the safe return of those children. That authorization includes weapons and tactics that are currently classified beyond your security clearance. Through the bridge windows, HFY could see the human fleet repositioning itself. The smaller, faster vessels were moving into attack formations around the asteroid field, while the larger ships were deploying what looked like sensor arrays of impossible complexity. "Admiral," HFY said carefully, "I want to assure you that the children are safe. We have taken them into protective custody and—" "Commander, you misunderstand the situation." Admiral Chen's image leaned forward slightly, and HFY could see something in her eyes that made his skin crawl. It wasn't anger or rage. It was the cold, calculating look of a predator who had found wounded prey. "I'm not concerned about the children's immediate safety. You're obviously not the ones who took them, and your reputation precedes you. I'm concerned about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that in approximately 47 minutes, every major news network in human space will broadcast the story of 63 children stolen from their homes and sold into slavery. I mean that in approximately 2 hours, the human population will demand action from their elected representatives. And I mean that in approximately 6 hours, those representatives will authorize military action that will make the Korthak campaign look like a training exercise." HFY felt his ship's gravity generators fluctuate as one of the massive human dreadnoughts passed nearby. The vessel was easily 10 times the size of his own ship, and its weapon arrays were powered and ready. "Admiral, surely we can resolve this diplomatically. The Galactic Council has protocols for—" "Commander," Admiral Chen interrupted, "let me share something with you. When we learned that New Brisbane had been attacked, we initiated what we call a Class Alpha response. Do you know what that means?" "No, ma'am." "It means that every human military vessel currently in service has been recalled from their assignments and is en route to this location. It means that every human colony, station, and settlement has been placed under martial law. It means that our entire industrial capacity has been converted to wartime production. It means that we have recalled every ambassador and severed all diplomatic ties with any species that has not explicitly condemned the attack on our children." The tactical display showed more ships arriving every minute. HFY's computers had given up trying to track individual vessels and were now simply displaying the fleet as an undifferentiated mass of contacts. "How many ships do you have?" he asked quietly. "Everyone we can build, commandeer, or steal," Admiral Chen replied. "Current count is approaching 60,000 vessels, with more arriving hourly." 60,000. HFY tried to process the number and failed. The entire Galactic Council defense fleet comprised fewer than 3,000 ships. "But, Admiral this is an unprecedented response to an act of war against human children." Chen's voice had gone deadly quiet. "Commander, I need you to understand something about my species. We are relatively new to galactic civilization, this is true. We are still learning the rules and protocols that govern interspecies relations, but there is one rule that supersedes all others in human society. You do not harm our children." On the bridge of the Prophet's Edge, Captain Vex Thule was having what could charitably be called a complete psychological breakdown. The Kethmaran was huddled in his command chair, his multiple arms wrapped around his body, making a high-pitched keening sound that his species made when experiencing extreme stress. "Commander," Admiral Chen continued, "I'm going to share some information with you that is not widely known outside of human space. When the Korthak attacked New Hebrides 3 years ago, they made the mistake of targeting a settlement with a school. 47 children were killed in the attack." HFY nodded. He remembered the incident, though the details had been classified. "What the galactic community was not told," Chen said, "is that we tracked down every individual Korthak involved in that attack. Not just the military personnel, every politician who authorized it, every administrator who planned it, every technician who maintained the ships that carried it out. It took us 18 months, but we found all 2,347 of them. What happened to them? They were given fair trials according to human military law. They were allowed to present evidence and call witnesses in their defense. They were provided with legal counsel and translators. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but her voice became somehow more frightening. And then they were executed. All of them. Every single one. The implications of her words hit HFY like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defeated the Korthak Empire, they had systematically hunted down and killed everyone involved in harming their children, regardless of rank or position. "Admiral," he said carefully, "what do you want from us?" "Three things, Commander. First, we want those children returned to their families immediately and safely. Second, we want every individual involved in their kidnapping identified and surrendered for trial. Third, we want assurance that this will never happen again." "And if the Kethmoran Republic refuses to cooperate?" Admiral Chen smiled, and HFY realized he would have nightmares about that expression for the rest of his life. "Then we will demonstrate why 67 major galactic civilizations have signed mutual defense pacts with humanity in the past 3 years, Commander. We will show the galaxy what happens when someone makes the mistake of threatening our children." Through the communication link, HFY could hear other voices in the background of the human command ship. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human fleets were moving toward every major Kethmoran system. Human diplomatic missions were being evacuated. Human trade agreements were being suspended. In the space of 4 hours, an entire interstellar republic was being systematically isolated and surrounded by the most powerful military force in galactic history. All because they had taken 63 children. "Admiral," HFY said quietly, "you've made your point. What are your immediate requirements?" 6 months later, Commander HFY stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council's flagship, watching the final act of what historians would later call the Kethmoran dissolution. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows, he could see the once mighty Kethmoran homeworld of Vexketh below, its surface dotted with the lights of human relief stations and refugee processing centers. The transformation had been absolute and terrifying in its efficiency. Within 72 hours of Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the Kethmoran Republic had surrendered unconditionally. Not because they were militarily defeated. There had been no actual battles, no planetary bombardments, no massive casualties. They had surrendered because the humans had done something far more devastating than destroy their military. They had made it impossible for the Kethmoran to exist as a spacefaring civilization. Every trade route that passed through Kethmoran space had been blocked by human fleets. Every communication relay that served Kethmoran worlds had been disabled by human cyber warfare specialists. Every financial institution that held Kethmoran assets had frozen their accounts at human request. In less than a week, an entire interstellar republic had been reduced to isolated worlds with no means of supporting themselves. But that had only been the beginning. "Commander," said Ambassador Thisara, the Council's lead diplomat, "the final reports have come in from the Human Justice Commission. Would you like to review them?" HFY nodded, accepting the datapad she offered. The contents made for sobering reading, even 6 months after the events. The 63 children had been returned to their families within 6 hours of Admiral Chen's arrival. They had been transported aboard hospital ships, staffed with the finest medical and psychological specialists humanity could provide. Every child had received comprehensive care, and remarkably, none had suffered permanent physical harm. The psychological trauma would take time to heal, but human child psychologists had reported that all 63 were making excellent progress. That had been the easy part. The difficult part had been what the humans called justice. HFY scrolled through the list of names and charges. Captain Vexthul and his crew had been the first to face trial, charged with kidnapping, slave trading, and what human law classified as crimes against children. The trials had been swift, efficient, and utterly fair by any galactic standard. The defendants had been provided with excellent legal representation, translators, and every consideration for their species-specific needs. They had all been found guilty. Vexthul himself was serving a life sentence in a human correctional facility, along with most of his crew. The few crew members who could prove they had tried to prevent or report the kidnapping had received lesser sentences and were already working in human rehabilitation programs. But the captain and his immediate accomplices were only the beginning of a very long list. The humans had traced the kidnapping operation back through every level of the criminal organization that had orchestrated it. They had identified every corrupt official who had provided false documentation, every port administrator who had looked the other way, every intelligence operative who had provided information about human colony defenses. All of them had faced trial. All of them had been convicted. The Kethmoran government officials who had been aware of the slave trade and had chosen to ignore it in exchange for tax revenue found themselves facing charges of conspiracy and aiding criminal enterprises. The judges who had dismissed previous complaints about Kethmoran slaving operations were charged with corruption and negligence. Even the legislators who had voted against anti-slavery measures were charged as accessories after the fact, but the humans hadn't stopped there. They had conducted a comprehensive audit of every Kethmoran commercial and military operation for the past 50 years. Every instance of slave trading, every case of abuse, every example of exploitation had been documented, investigated, and prosecuted. The scope of the investigation had grown to encompass not just the kidnapping of human children, but the entire systematic oppression that the Kethmoran had practiced for generations. "How many total convictions?" HFY asked. 47,832 individuals, Ambassador Thisara replied, ranging from minor officials who accepted bribes to look the other way, all the way up to 3 former prime ministers who directly profited from the slave trade. HFY felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had essentially put an entire government on trial and found it guilty. And the Kethmoran Republic itself? Officially dissolved by order of the Galactic Council, with human concurrence, she said. The territory has been divided into 7 administrative zones, each overseen by a different council member species. The humans have retained oversight authority for all matters relating to sentient rights and child welfare. Through the observation windows, HFY could see the evidence of the new reality. Human ships patrolled the system, but they weren't warships anymore. They were medical vessels, supply transports, and construction ships. The humans had moved from conquest to rehabilitation with the same terrifying efficiency they had shown in everything else. Schools were being built on every former Kethmoran world, designed to educate young Kethmoran about galactic law and sentient rights. Medical stations provided free health care to any being in need. Job training centers taught former soldiers and slavers how to contribute to legitimate economic activities. "What about the children?" HFY asked. "The human children, I mean. How are they doing?" Ambassador Thisara's expression softened slightly. "According to the latest reports, all 63 have made full recoveries. Several have requested to address the Galactic Council about their experiences. And the families? That's where things get interesting, Commander." She activated a holographic display showing a star map of human space. "Do you see these new installations?" HFY studied the map. Scattered throughout human territory were symbols he didn't recognize, geometric shapes that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "Defense platforms," he guessed. "Monitoring stations," she corrected. The humans have constructed what they call the Child Protection Network. Every human settlement, no matter how small or remote, is now connected to a real-time monitoring system that can detect and respond to threats against children. She zoomed in on one of the stations, showing its incredible complexity. Each station is equipped with sensors capable of detecting distress calls across multiple dimensions and quantum frequencies. They're connected to rapid response fleets that can reach any point in human space within 6 hours. 6 hours, HFY repeated, the same amount of time it took them to organize the rescue of the 63 children. Precisely. The humans have decided that 6 hours is the maximum acceptable response time for any threat to their young. They've restructured their entire military and civilian infrastructure around that goal. The implications were staggering. HFY realized that the humans had essentially turned their entire civilization into a protective network designed around a single principle, the absolute safety of their children. "Ambassador," he said slowly, "what does this mean for the rest of the galaxy?" Before she could answer, a new voice spoke from behind them. "It means that the rules have changed. Commander." HFY turned to see Admiral Chen approaching across the observation deck. The human officer looked older than she had 6 months ago, with new lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her hair. But her bearing was as confident as ever. "Admiral Chen," HFY said, inclining his head respectfully, "I was just reviewing the final reports on the Kethmoran situation." "Thorough, weren't they?" Chen asked, joining him at the observation window. "My government believes in being comprehensive when it comes to justice." "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Was all of this really necessary? The Kethmoran Republic was destroyed. 47,000 individuals were tried and convicted. An entire species has been placed under galactic supervision. All for 63 children who were ultimately returned safely." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the relief operations on the planet below. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful but firm. "Commander, let me tell you about a conversation I had with my daughter last week. She's 12 years old, about the same age as some of the children who were taken from New Brisbane." HFY remained silent, sensing that this was important. "She asked me why we had worked so hard to help children we'd never met, children who weren't even related to us. She wanted to know why her mother had spent 6 months away from home, commanding fleets and overseeing trials, all for strangers." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that those children weren't strangers. They were her brothers and sisters, her cousins and friends, even if she'd never met them. I told her that every human child belongs to every human adult, and that every human adult has a responsibility to protect every human child." Admiral Chen turned to face HFY directly. "But more than that, Commander, I told her that we did all this so that she would never have to be afraid, so that she could grow up knowing that if anyone, anywhere in the galaxy, ever tried to hurt her or any other child, the entire human species would move heaven and earth to stop them. And the cost? There is no cost too high to pay for that kind of security," Chen said without hesitation. "The Kethmoran Republic was built on the suffering of children and other vulnerable beings. Its destruction was not a tragedy, it was justice." An aide approached and whispered something to Admiral Chen. She nodded and turned back to HFY. "Commander, I have to go. But before I leave, I want you to understand something. What happened to the Kethmoran isn't unusual for us. It's our new standard operating procedure. Any species, any organization, any individual who threatens human children will face the same response. Even if it means war with the entire galaxy?" Admiral Chen smiled. And once again, HFY was reminded why that expression had haunted his dreams for months. "Commander, the galaxy is welcome to try. But they should remember that we've had 67 civilizations sign mutual defense pacts with us in the past 6 months. They should remember that our industrial capacity now exceeds that of the rest of the galaxy combined." And they should remember what happened to the last people who made the mistake of threatening our children. She began to walk away, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Commander? The 63 children from New Brisbane have started a pen pal program with children from other species. They want to learn about different cultures and share their experiences. My daughter is corresponding with a young Vorthan from the Andromeda Colony Cluster. That's wonderful, Admiral. Yes, it is. And Commander, if anyone ever threatens those Vorthan children or any other children anywhere in the galaxy, they'll discover that humanity considers them all part of our extended family now. With that, Admiral Chen walked away, leaving HFY alone with Ambassador Thesaara and a profound understanding of how completely the galaxy had changed. Ambassador, he said quietly, I think we need to update our threat assessment protocols. Already done, Commander. As of yesterday, any action that could be construed as threatening to children of any species has been classified as a potential Class 1 extinction event. HFY nodded, still watching the human relief operations below. In the past 6 months, he had witnessed the complete transformation of galactic civilization. The humans had demonstrated that they possessed not just the military might to enforce their will, but the moral conviction to reshape entire societies in pursuit of justice. And they had done it all because someone had made the catastrophic mistake of taking their children. As he watched, a transport ship lifted off from the planet's surface, carrying former Kethmoran officials to their trials. Another ship landed, bringing supplies and personnel for the rehabilitation efforts. The work would continue for years. Decades, perhaps, until every trace of the old oppressive system had been replaced with something better. It was, HFY reflected, probably the most expensive lesson in galactic history. But it was also, quite possibly, the most important one. The message was clear, written in the dissolution of an entire republic and transmitted to every corner of known space. Humanity's children were not to be touched. Ever. By anyone. The price for forgetting that lesson was the complete destruction of everything you had ever built. And as HFY had learned over the past 6 months, humans had very, very long memories.